Today, I wanted to share with you the three different types of astrology. And this came about because I've been working with consultation charts a lot lately. So a consultation chart can be used in place of a birth chart if you don't have someone's birth time. And I was just thinking about how, so I've been using consultation charts, and I have been trying to do more research on how other people use how other astrologers use consultation charts, and I haven't really found a whole lot. And I was just thinking how, there is less awareness on other types of astrology, like horary astrology, electional astrology, and astrocartography. There's like all these different kinds of astrology, and when I say astrology, what comes to mind, what you may think of, is the birth chart, and there's so many other different kinds, but they can be lumped into these three separate categories, which makes it easier to wrap your mind around. So I just wanted to share what these different kinds of astrology are and what they can be used for, how I use them, and how cool all the different kinds of astrologies are. So, um, yeah, so also, side note, I just want to acknowledge and thank you for being patient with me as I reinvent my channel, as I reinvent my presentation. It's been a little vulnerable for me to do so. If you've been watching me for a while, you know that I originally did weekly astrology videos for quite a few years, and took a break from that, and now doing things a little bit differently. And so I just want to thank you for, sticking with me in that change if you've been following me for a while. And if you're new, welcome. Thanks also for sticking with me as I transition into empath astrology. So, all right, so what are the three different types of astrology? There is natal astrology, so your birth chart based on the time and place and moment that you were born. The second type of astrology is called horary astrology, spelled Horary. This is also called inquiries or question astrology. So horary astrology is where a person goes to an astrologer and they ask a very specific question. This can be a yes or no question. It can be, is this going to happen? It can be, is this not going to happen? What is going to come about from this situation? Those are all horary astrology. That's one particular branch of astrology. Now, the third kind is electional astrology. And I'm going to go into all of these in a little bit more detail, but this is just giving you a broad view of the different types. So the third type is electional. And so, sorry, I got distracted there for a minute. The third type of astrology is electional. And so this is different from natal. This is different from horary, because electional is when you choose the chart. Essentially, you're choosing the birth chart. So this is used if you are planning a business, if you're planning when to launch something, you're planning a trip, the moment that you leave. So this is, again, it's the same concept, only you are choosing. So you're selecting a day, a year, a moment in time, and there is a birth chart associated with that. So most often in contemporary times, we'll use this for starting a business. And there's a lot of debate on when the moment is that the business begins. And I'll talk about that more in a minute, but important to know that these are all distinct types of astrology. So natal, birth chart, the horary, which is the question, and electional, which is when you choose. You are electing when something is born, essentially. And so all different kinds of astrologies and all different techniques and lineages can all go into these separate categories. So whether someone is practicing psychological astrology or Hellenistic or medieval or even Indian or Tibetan or Chinese astrology, all of those different lineages can be grouped into these categories. And I think this is helpful for someone who is really interested in astrology, learning, like if you want to know what it is that astrology can do for you. And it sometimes can be kind of overwhelming. There's all these different styles and techniques, and there's solar arcs and progressions and perfections, and how do you make sense of everything? So all of those things can be chunked into these three categories. And what's cool is these three categories all work together so that for example, someone comes to me for a natal reading, for a birth chart reading, and so we look at their birth chart and we look at the themes that are happening in their life over the course of their lifetime. We look at their transits, the current phase that they're in right now. That's all natal. So that is all working with you and your energy, your life as a very unique individual. And then let's say that you have a specific question like, should I move this year? Or should I go back to school? Or should I look for a new job? Those are all very specific questions, and we can use your birth chart to look at the transits. Like I would look at, okay, like what's going on, especially if we're talking about a work situation. I would really be looking at Saturn and Jupiter. What aspects are they making? Are they making aspects that make things indicate that things are a little bit easier, or is there a little bit of tension? Are there like challenging energies? And this is not to say like do it or don't do it. This is the beauty of the natal chart. It's more like, what can you expect? What can you expect from this time? When does that change? And what kinds of experiences can you expect from this time versus this time, etc., and what are the combination of things? So that's all the birth chart. Now if you want to ask a specific question, then we can pull a horary chart for the moment that you ask that question. So so I would do this when we're in the consultation session. If you ask me a specific question, I'll also do sessions where it's purely based on that question on the horary chart. And so what typically happens that's really magical is that the horary chart, the question chart, will link in to the natal chart. So what I mean by link in is that there's going to be some synastry there. There's going to be a connection. And some astrologers say this is what makes the horary chart radical or accurate, so to speak. So let's say, hypothetically, just to give you a sense of what I'm talking about, let's say you ask a question and then in the horary chart, the rising for the horary chart is making an aspect to your moon or to your Venus or something like that. So usually there's this connection there. The astrologer Ben Dykes, medieval astrologer Ben Dykes, I think he used this term nesting that I really liked. I've actually heard this word nesting related to astrology a couple of times in this past week, and I really like it. I feel like it speaks to this process. He used this word nesting, and that the charts will nest into each other, and the astrologer Jessica DeRuzza, who I adore, she also used this term nesting, and that there is a nested phenomenon of experiences that we have. So anyways, I digress. So the next part of this process is the electional. So let's say a person is thinking about moving. We look at the natal chart. What phase are you in? We do a horary on it, and the horary, to elaborate a little bit more, I guess, before I move on to electional, is so the horary chart is really cool because it is basically the moment that this particular question was born. And so if someone is asking, should I move? They've been thinking about this, right? Like usually. They've been thinking about this, they've been pondering on it. They've maybe like journaled on it, they've like maybe asked other people. But the moment that that person poses the question to the astrologer is seen as the moment that that question is born astrologically. And I realize that may sound like a little metaphysical, but you know, it is what it is. It is a form of divination. And so the horary chart will provide the astrologer with an indication of the events that have led up to this situation symbolically, and then symbolically the like what to expect, the outcome. And sometimes it's a clear answer, sometimes not. You know, life is complicated. Things are not always clear cut. So yeah, it's really interesting because it'll show sort of like you think I can compare it to like if you're into tarot and you do a 3-card spread. There would be the past, present, and future. That's sort of the idea with the horary chart, and it's always very interesting. So, and if you all have questions as I'm going through this, let me know. I don't always know how much of this makes sense, or if I'm going too fast or too slow, or if you're like, well, wait, Shauna, what about this? Ask me. Please leave a comment and let me know. And I'll take questions at the end if you're watching live and you want to ask me a question. Yes, okay, so let's say a person asks, should I move, or should I take this job, or whatever. Then is when we can actually do an election chart, whether that is now within the current session, or sometimes, you know, things need to be worked out. There's more information or research that a person needs to do. But once they're ready to make the decision to do the thing, that's when you would bring in electional astrology. And so electional astrology is when you choose to do something at an auspicious time. So this can be very simple or can be very complicated. So working with planetary days and planetary hours, that is electional astrology, because you are choosing to do something at a particular time. Let's say you choose to, you have a choice of when you get to start a new job. You can start, let's say Monday, Wednesday, or Thursday. Monday is the moon's day, Wednesday is Mercury's day, and Thursday is Jupiter's day. So without knowing what kind of job you're going to choose, I would tend to highly recommend starting on the Thursday out of those options, because that's Jupiter's day. Jupiter is about luck and abundance and prosperity. Mercury would be my second choice, especially if you're doing something in marketing or communication or business, or any of those Mercury kind of job significations. So that's, I mean, like, that's super simple, right? Like that's an election. It can be like at the other end of the spectrum, more complicated, where you elect a day and a very specific time based on the chart that is, and that's a lot more complicated. You would want an astrologer to do that for you, because again, it's more complicated. And so that would be choosing if you can, start when you start a new job, when you launch a project, when you launch a program, when you make your website live. That's also a good way to use electional astrology if you're launching a new website. If you are moving, if you are signing a lease, that's a really good one too, or signing a contract, that's when we would use electional astrology. And so the idea behind this is the thing that is created, the thing that is started, whether that is a contract or a lease or a new home, that is birthed at a very particular point in time. And moments in time, according to astrological philosophy, each moment in time carries the energy of the moment that it was birthed. Just like you. Like if you think about it, a birth chart is really just a moment in time where all of these different transits were happening. So you're kind of like a walking transit that gets elaborated on as you have experiences and interact with people, and then there's, you know, transits to your energy that activates the energy that's inside of you. So it's pretty cool. So I hope that this is helpful. I wanted to give you some more just like examples, like working with transits is natal astrology. Working with synastry is natal astrology. So synastry is when you take two people's birth charts and you lay them on top of each other, and then you see what connections are there. That's super interesting. So that you're working with two natal charts, so it still goes into that natal chart category. Working with astrocartography, where you take your birth chart and you lay it onto a map to see what planetary energies are active in different areas of the world. That is natal astrology. Consultation charts, I think, are really interesting. So consultation chart, I really would like to make another video entirely just off of that, because there are not a lot of videos that I've found on YouTube or podcasts even talking about the consultation chart. So that is when you pull a chart for the moment that a consultation begins. And so astrologers use this a lot. And you can use it for any kind of business that you do, though. Whether you're doing, like, let's say, coaching sessions or massage therapy or anything like that, and it can inform the time and sort of give you an idea of what is appropriate for the client. Let's see, what else did I want to say? Okay, so I saw that there was a couple of questions, and yeah, before I take questions, the last thing I'll say too is that, you know, I use planetary hours, planetary days, just even for like planning social engagements. It doesn't have to be this big fancy thing. And the more that you learn, of course, the more that there is to know, but the basics I find are really effective. So Candace, hi Candace, I'm reading your comment here. Hi, I hope you're well too. Candace asks, how does the astrologer choose the specific time for electional? Do they choose random times? Really good question. Okay, so do they choose random times? No. That's the whole point of electional, is that it is very intentional. So what will typically happen is, I think I forgot to mention, one of the classic electionals is planning a wedding. So in that case, in that example, so it's always based on what the activity is. So if you're wanting to plan your wedding versus when you start a new job versus when you launch a project, that is going to require different energies. Now, we're always looking for auspicious energies, so usually that includes energies that involve a strong Venus or a strong Jupiter or a strong moon, a waxing moon. Those are all sort of like basics that an astrologer would look for, but it's going to be different based on each activity, because what we want is, we want for the chart to reflect the most beneficial energy that is in alignment with the activity that you're planning. So for example, with a wedding, Typically, someone would say, okay, I want to get married in April to May. So you have this 2 month period. And I want it to be on a Saturday. So a Saturday within that 2 month period. Let's say that's your time period to work with. So what an astrologer would do is they would look at that time period, all the Saturdays from April to May, and they would look at they would sort of chunk it down. So it really depends on the time that you're looking at, but just to give you an idea, I would want to be looking for a waxing moon. So that would cut out, certain Saturdays, and certain Saturdays would have that, certain Saturdays wouldn't. I would also want to make sure that the ruler of the chart is in really great dignity, that it's in an auspicious house, that it's in a sign that is strong for that planet. I would want to look at the aspects that are being made to that planet. I would want to know what the moon is doing. Is that in a sign that the moon does well in? Does it reflect a positive energy for a wedding? All of those things. So yeah, so it can get really complicated doing electional, especially when you have a limited time period. And so I think it's helpful to know that, that is something where if you are interested in doing that, if you have a little bit of astrology knowledge, you can usually do things, you can work with that. Like if you can read a birth chart, doing an electional, you can work with that, but it gets really complicated and nuanced because we're looking at what is going to be most beneficial and auspicious and in alignment with the actual event. So I hope that makes sense. Yeah, so I hope this was helpful to you. Again, just to summarize and really bring this home, the 3 different types of astrology that, whether regardless of lineage or regardless of type, are natal astrology. There is horary astrology and there is electional astrology. Candace asks, are there programs that you recommend for someone wanting to study astrology in depth, or a software? There's a lot I could say about that. I think it depends on your goals and what it is that you want to learn. What I would recommend is, if you're interested in studying Western astrology, I would check out Kepler College. They have a certificate program and they have a lot of excellent teachers, anything from general to much more specific. Like you can even take a course on horary astrology in particular. So I would check them out, Kepler Astrology. You can Google them. And if you're interested in getting a consultation, whether that is birth chart or horary or electional, or a combo of all of those, I would love to support you in any way that I can. You can book an astrology reading with me on my website, empathastrology.com. And until then, I will see you soon. Bye for now.